know it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, sorry we're a day late. Yes, we had some very rare scheduling issues yesterday on my side. I mean, we've had to come at you 24 hours later than planned, but it's international break, and we thought it'd be all right, to be fair. Plus, we're back to news of a new England manager, which we otherwise wouldn't have known about, Sam, with Fab Romano. Here we going, Tommy Tuchel, or Tuchel. I need to remember, we're trying to figure out which one it actually is. I think it's Tuchel, isn't it? As the next man in the impossible jobs hot seat. BBC just confirmed it as well, so it looks like it is happening. Exciting times. Anyway, hope you're all doing well. I spent last week not really enjoying the break in so much as being pretty laid low with man flu or maybe even COVID passed me by my beloved toddler. So please excuse any coughs, sneezes. I don't make the mic for in this one to mute it. And I'm joined today, as always, by Sam. Hope you had a better week than me, mate. How are you getting on?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah, no illnesses on my side. So if you do have a bit of a coughing fit, you can mute yourself and I'll ramble on for a couple of minutes here and there. So hopefully I'll be able to cover any of that off. We are, as always, Who Got the Assist? On today's pods, as seems to be very popular this week in the content world, we're zooming back a bit, after the step back with Nick last week. A great pod, by the way. If you haven't gone and seen that or listened to it already, do please go and check that out from last week with Nick, who is flying extremely close to the sun at the moment in the giddy top 500, I think. So yeah, do go and check that out for pearls of wisdom from him on how to get to that sort of rank at this point in the season. Today, though, we will be having a look at the next quad of fixtures, so game weeks 8 through to 11. And obviously that leads us up prior to the next international break, the final one before the turn of the year. Tom's produced a very decent spreadsheet. In the notes, he's put little spreadsheet, but I can tell you it's very, very impressive. So do make sure you go and check it out on YouTube if you're listening to the pod version, if at all possible. And all of this will be detailing the non-pen XGI data and the FPL points for the now traditional whistle-stop tour through all the teams and the key men, plus our thoughts on where we're looking to go from here with all of them. Plus, of course, we'll take a look at the game week ahead, which obviously at one point was looking very juicy with a Saka potential injury, but it's cooled down a little bit now, maybe a little bit less tasty than before, albeit one of us at least might be ready to throw a little bit of a chaos grenade in there as well. It is Tuesday, the 15th of October. The vast majority of the international break games have been and gone. And a quick shout out before we go ahead with FPL meets this weekend. We always try to shout them out. 19th of October in London, as always. Do go and check them out on Twitter at FPL Meets if you want any further details on that. I can vouch for it. Tom can vouch for it as regular attendees. It's absolutely amazing. Great laugh, especially if you've never been before. Do not be worried at all. It's all a welcome. Very, very good fun. In the meantime, though, shall we crack on with the game week review and do a very quick summary, Tom?
Yep. So we went through it last week in a little bit more detail, although perhaps we should have done that this week because, you know, we're kind of zoomed back in now. But yeah, last week ended up with the 58, which was okay. Basically, the big thing I did was that Luis Diaz, we got the news, what seems like a decade ago now. So much has changed, Sam, that he wasn't going to be starting in the early game. So I moved in Brennan Johnson last minute, which is obviously quite good. Got the goal. Probably could have got another one, to be fair. I just skied it over the bar the second chance. And if Werner had found him in the first minute, you know, it would have been laughing. But hey ho, pretty good. No captaincy bang. Haaland did nothing. Own Saka. And as I said last week, I was genuinely really surprised when I saw all the scores come through because I was out somewhere without any signal that Saka's 16-pointer was net very good. And the effective ownership was actually pretty low. So that was obviously a bit of a boon. Elsewhere, you know, the likes of Bumo scoring a penalty in the 5-3, obviously probably could have got more. We were hoping, but never mind. And Trent with an 8-pointer with a clean sheet. That was pretty much the week. Little things like Johnson and Rico Lewis with the assist as well. Little things like that kind of really helped. I'm now up to 271k. So the recovery from Parmageddon is on, and I'm hoping over the next 4 I can and obviously get back to near the top 100k. But let's see how that goes. How about you?
Well, yeah, nowhere near that at this point. I'm 1.5 million just inside, 56 points from game week 7, enough for a 570k green arrow, so absolutely fine. Couple of points off of you, and I do feel like I'm losing a couple of points in ground to you every week at the moment. Not that we're in direct competition, of course, but it's always nice to try and keep pace. Very similar team in terms of who actually returned for me. Alexander-Arnold, Lewis, Saka, and Burmo as well, all returned. The big difference between our two teams is you had Johnson. I went with the other Spurs attacker with Solanke, who had no shots on goal, which is, I think, a bit of a misnomer, but did, of course, get the assist for the Johnson goal. So 5 points for him, 56 overall. Pretty happy generally. And now I've got 3 free transfers to use over the international break. So not so bad. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and that chaos grenade could well be issued. Who knows, with those free transfers in the pocket? I've only got the one, so probably more if I want to be proactive, or maybe if there's an injury which comes out of the press conferences. As Sam said, it's Tuesday night recording, so we don't know yet. But yeah, all to be covered off in a little bit. So the main topic this week, as I promised last week, it's look at the 20 teams, what's going down with them. On screen, it's the 4-2-0. We'll be smoking out the 20 teams who are all sorted by Team XG, shown, and it also shows the next 4 fixtures on the 3-point scale, because why not? Clever people like James from Planet FPL will look at bookies odds and things like this. I'm just a simple man, so all I did was the FDR has 4 points, so this is just even further distilling it down into good, bad, and somewhere in the middle, because at the end of the day, that's what you really need. Top end non-pen SGI point scorer is also shown, and the top FPL point scorer. And there's also it shows you if they're the same or different. Don't worry if listening, we'll of course talk you all through this, but that's basically what's on the screen if you watch on YouTube. We'll go through this sort of team by team, briefly mentioning where we think they are and how we see the next 4, and we'll talk about kind of the wider ramifications of this later on. And we'll spend a bit more time, I think it's fair to say, on FPL sort of relevant teams, just because we're not trying to put out a 150-minute special here. We'll be ruthless on focusing on FPL relevance. Apologies if there's some burning niche player you really love that we just simply don't get to. Sorry about that. Let's go from the top, Sam. And the top is actually Spurs. I think that it's one of those things that if you just told your average Joe in the street, or Josephine in the street, or whatever the other equivalent would be, that Spurs are currently the top team XG, people would be like, oh, really? That's a surprise. But yes, it's one of those teams which is out there. So they are top by not very much, ahead of Chelsea, 0.4. Next 4, I've kind of labelled it as kind of some in the middle. So West Ham at home, Crystal Palace away, Aston Villa at home, and Ipswich at home, which is obviously a good fixture. The top scorer for non-pen XGI is Solanke, 4.2, but that's not reflective in the top FPL scorer, which is Maddison with 39 points at the moment. They're one of 7 teams where the top underlying data scorer isn't the top FPL point scorer. A couple of things with Spurs, Sam. So despite being the top for team XG, Solanke, Maddison and Johnson are only 9th, 17th and 19th for non-pen XGI, which maybe suggests a bit of like a spread of threat. But Solanke's only played 5 games. And he's the only player in the top 20 there. And in fact, widening to top 30, there's only 2 players who haven't played 6 games or more. KDB in 30th and Son as well in 24th. So Spurs have got 4 players in the top 25 for a non-pen XGI so far this season, which is, it just kind of shows that there is a bit of a spread, but Solanke having those limited minutes means that perhaps he's going to eventually emerge as the talisman here. What do you think of Spurs at the moment? I mean, the definitely, we've both got representative. Are you looking to add another one throughout the next 4?
Yeah, I'm certainly interested in doing so. The XG as a team looks very promising. I would say that maybe it's a bit noisy after the Man United game. I seem to remember they accumulated something like 5+ XG in that game alone. Obviously, those games need to be played and it all counts. But we try to maybe take away the outlier samples or the outlier examples rather from some of these, especially in a small sample size at this point in time. But generally, they look pretty impressive going forwards. And I do imagine with the fixtures to come, a lot of them are grey here on the ticker. I actually think West Ham is probably a green in my own mindset. I do actually really like that as a home fixture.
Yeah.
So I think 8 of the 11 goals, I think I saw this on Twitter somewhere, that they've conceded have been through the centre, from the centre forward of the opposition team so far. So Solanke hopefully can get some returns in that one. And like you said, only 5 matches so far for Solanke. Obviously, Son has been injured as well, and them both being quite promising in the underlying data shows to me that there's probably more to come from Spurs when they have their best possible 11 playing. Werner playing on the left wing for the majority of those minutes where Son hasn't been has led to, I would say, some missed chances, let's say. So I would imagine that with the fixtures to come, they could even improve from this. So yeah, I'm very bullish on Spurs right now. Unlucky in the points total in the league table, but XG wise, it's a pretty much different story. And that's honestly the only thing we really care about at the moment. So yeah, Solanke, very comfortable as an owner. I think the Brighton game, as I suggested a minute ago, was a little bit of an outlier. I think they used him as that classic sort of Harry Kane deep lying forward role with the wingers sort of going in beyond him, and he can get the ball on the half turn and play them through, which obviously is basically how Johnson got his goal as well. So I think it's important to remember the game or two before that, he got 4 big chances, which is very, very decent for any striker. So yeah, still very bullish on Spurs. Maddison also equally impressive, very good on the bonus points. Yeah, like them, don't really have any faults, and well priced as well on the whole.
Yeah, Solanke's a 5th for XG per 90, which is obviously very encouraging. I wouldn't take last week as much of anything. I do really like Brennan Johnson basically as a Watkins owner. Like if you own Watkins, maybe you own like a Jackson or something, you might not be in too much of a rush to move it on. Or indeed, if you set up with Haaland and then maybe someone a little bit cheaper, like I saw that the FPL General's got Calvert-Lewin, for example, in that slot, or maybe later on that would be a Cunha or something like that. I wouldn't be, I'd be kind of thinking, okay, well, Johnson's actually quite decent. Obviously, he has that sort of run of quote unquote form at the moment. And last year as well, I remember with the homebrews I did at the start of the season, Johnson's non-pen XGI per 90 was the highest of those between 5.5 and 7.5 at the start of the season. And it's kind of showing at the moment in how he's playing. One of those that you kind of feel just will get his goal no matter what. He did go off at half time in the Wales game, and it was just he took a kick and felt something. One to watch, obviously, could be a 1 week wonder for me. Who knows?
I think he's meant to be okay.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. I think he was suspended from the next game anyway.
Exactly.
So absolutely fine with that. The other thing to kind of mention here is that they've managed to get this with playing quite on paper, at least, expectations from last year, tough defences. So they've played Newcastle thus far, they've played Arsenal thus far, played Brentford, who have admittedly not been the defence of old, and they've played United, who have actually, I think they've got the most clean sheets of any team, haven't they? At the moment?
Yeah, 4 so far. Yeah. No, behind Liverpool maybe.
Just behind. No, you're right. Just behind Liverpool.
Yeah.
So they've got there with a couple of potentially on paper tough games in the funnel, and that kind of, I guess, stokes excitement for the later games. As you said, probably the West Ham game, I was being a bit harsh to call that harsh. No, I was being a bit too kind to West Ham, perhaps, by saying that that's a middling game. I'd want to mention is Pedro Porro, Sam. FPL Review in particular is obsessed with me getting Porro in, to the extent that alongside Bruno Fernandes and alongside Ebi Eze, I have to exclude him from any solvers. The SGC is not awful. They're actually 7th for SGC, but it feels like they're not going to be keeping clean sheets anytime soon. And I feel like I'd be happier elsewhere, but just because defenders are so contingent on those, on not conceding basically this year in order to get into the bonus. So for me, he's not really on radar, but I mean, is he of interest to you?
Yeah, he's definitely of interest to me. Spurs defensively have been a little bit better on the data this season so far. So I always want to be careful not to just get bedded in belief systems from the previous season. I don't think they're going to turn into prime Arsenal or anything defensively. But if we can bank maybe an extra 2 or 3 clean sheets across the season from them compared to last year, that brings them up to 10, 11, I think. And that might not be that bad if you consider Porro to still be as attacking as he was last year. And that brings me on to my final point on Porro, and maybe the one hesitation I've got with him is he doesn't seem to be getting as involved in the attacking movements until later on in the game at the moment. And I just wonder if he's been told to just play a little bit more within himself from an attacking sense. And he's still getting decent data, so maybe this is more of an eye test thing and I'm reading it wrong, but it certainly doesn't seem like he's as involved in those final balls across or final box movements towards a shooting opportunity. With these next 4 games, though, like you said, they've already played some tough ones, so maybe it was just a tactical thing for those matches, and he's going to get forward against West Ham at home, against Crystal Palace away, against Ipswich at home, almost certainly. And if he does, then he's still getting the data to prove himself pretty decent at that price. He's certainly far from a must-own, though, at this point, and I am umming and ahhing whether or not he could be a potential replacement even for a Trent, let's say, for the next few game weeks, given the fixtures and the fixture swing that we'll come on to with Liverpool in a moment.
I mean, it's decent enough involvement, but it's not quite to the level that, and maybe that's kind of
that we'd expect.
Yeah, and maybe that's sort of collaborated by what you were saying with the eye test and how he's playing at the moment. So well, always one to monitor. But at the same time, I think that there's always the argument with a player like Trent where you kind of say, okay, he's basically a Liverpool attacker and playing in defence. I'm not quite sure it quite works with Porro at the moment.
I think last year it did, and not so much now. Yeah.
With Johnson being there. I mean, Maddison is the top kind of point scorer. I mean, James from Planet FPL says he's not going to be getting far enough forward really to score enough goals to justify that the price differential between Johnson and Maddison. I was speaking to FPL Mayor, I think it was on Twitter about this as well. And I said, the 0.9 this year is going to be so useful elsewhere, especially when you come to kind of the game week 12 strategy, which we'll talk about at the very end. It just kind of doesn't quite work for me to go with Maddison, albeit that if he does score, then those bonus are likely to be coming home to him, aren't they, really, given how involved he is. Brilliant. Okay, so on to Chelsea. Chelsea up to second. Got a very kind of scary next 4, I think. Liverpool away, Newcastle home, Man United away, and Arsenal at home. Liverpool away probably should be red in this rather than Mare, but there we go. And unsurprisingly, Cole Palmer, who's top for non-pen SGI at the moment, is the top scorer for them, and he's top just all over, and he's a joint top scorer in FPL as well, 67. Jackson's worth mentioning too, Sam. Third for non-pen SGI, equal with Haaland right now, and currently ahead of the likes of Saka and Salah. 7 goals and assists this year. A cut price addition alongside Palmer potentially. I mentioned him earlier on as a player that you maybe wouldn't want to be moving on elsewhere if you did own him. Not sure you trust him to cover Palmer, though. It does feel like it's a case of kind of Palmer or nothing with Chelsea. And if you don't go with Palmer now, it's kind of just hoping that the players that you've got, as we discussed last week, are going to be able to just take him on effectively and match him. So your Johnsons, who have I got in that scenario? Your Boomos, whatever, are able to match what Palmer's giving to his owners.
Yeah, so Palmer's a real conundrum at the moment if you don't already own him, especially if you're not on a wild card. I think if you are, I'd probably just take a chance and just have him straight from the off and just get that move done, because inevitably you're going to want him soon enough. I would actually argue that game week 9 is relatively the start of their decent run. Once Liverpool's out the way, this fixture tick is going to look a lot different over the next stretch. It looks quite negative now because 2 of the next 4 are pretty poor, Liverpool and Arsenal in 8 and 11 respectively. Once one of those is out the way, I can make peace with just one tough game, and that would be the Arsenal home fixture. I'm not worried at all about home to Newcastle. Newcastle don't tend to travel very well, and I expect Chelsea to get a very decent amount of chances in that game. Man United away from home, very similar feeling there. Not scared about that at all, despite what we've said about Man United's clean sheets. And even in those 2 fixtures, Liverpool and Arsenal, Palmer is the sort of player, and I tried telling myself this at the start of the season and forgot almost instantly, but these mercurial talents that are the 2-3 best players in the Premier League, you're looking at the Sakas, the Palmers, the Haalands, maybe even more so with Palmer than with Haaland at this point. He can create these moments against any team himself. All he needs is to pick up the ball somewhere in the opposition half, and he can create these chances even against the best defences. And you wouldn't put it past Chelsea to score one goal, let's say, against Liverpool or against Arsenal. If they do, so far, there's, I think, a 69% chance that Palmer's on the end of it in some way, shape, or form in terms of assists, goals.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think even if Chelsea only score one goal in those games, you're playing the odds a little bit. Palmer's most likely to get the goal or the assist there. And if it's a low scoring game, which I'd expect both of them to be, he's got a decent chance of bonus points too. So genuinely, I wouldn't be scared of owning him in any of those 4 fixtures. And there's quite a large part of me just shouting, like, why don't you just bring this guy in immediately, get it done, and then you just don't have to worry about it from now on.
Yeah, Talisman Theory is epitomised, and it's certainly one that we'll discuss in just a little bit, actually, when we get on to the game week 12 onwards. Defensively doing okay as well. Nick owned Robert Sanchez. Sorry, I call him Roger Sanchez because of the DJ in the 1980s. Who I'm sure will end up being eventually dropped, but at the moment he's doing all right. Obviously, there's Jorgensen, the stalking horse, and Colwell at 4.6. He was actually in a lot of my wildcard sort of drafts. Seems like the ever present there right now. I'd suggest that if you're a wildcard in game week 12, that would be kind of when you kind of go for it. They've got a really nice run, to be honest. Like after the Arsenal game, they didn't play another top team effectively other than Spurs actually in game 15 all the way until the 25th of January game 23 when they play Man City. So really nice long run, and he'll be a player that I'd be looking at, to be honest, and a good Christmas too. So if he is sort of looking like the kind of guy who's going to be playing the 90-minute man, that looks all good to me. So he'd be one again who's kind of in mind. But yeah, overall I'm definitely surprised us, haven't they, Sam?
Yeah, for sure. They look a lot more coherent, much faster than I imagine they would be. Obviously, it seems to be regular upheaval at Chelsea season on season. I was surprised they got rid of Poch, but so far that decision seems to be a fairly prudent one. Maresca seems to know exactly who his strongest 11 is, knows exactly which player is the backup in each of the attacking positions. And I really didn't expect that after 7 or 8 game weeks. I thought there'd be a lot more guesswork when it comes to us trying to figure out who the starting 11 would be every week. And whilst I'm sure they will rotate as fixture congestion comes, there's a fair few players that you could put good money on being on that starting 11 week in, week out. Palmer obviously being one of them, not registered for European competition, which is absolutely ideal. But there's quite a few of those names, Colwell being another, that you can rely on pretty much every single week. And yeah, the depth they've got to come off the bench around the 60th, 70th minute every week, they look really impressive and they look well drilled as well. So yeah, they'll be a factor, and I'm not massively surprised to see them up here in the XG at the moment either.
No, and I think that you're definitely going to be interested in Palmer all the time if you don't own him, and fearing him if you don't. It feels very sort of Mo Salah, doesn't it, of old? And talking Mo Salah, let's move on to Liverpool. We've all jumped off, haven't we, really? Apart from, well, all, but a lot of people have jumped off.
I've still got 2.
Diaz is now being sold heavily, the most sold player of all. Next 4, they've got 3 at home. They've got Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Brighton at home, and Villa at home. I'd venture that at least 2, if not 3 of those, i.e. the home fixtures, you're not going to be too worried about them in terms of an attacking sense. The next big good game is in game week 12 is Southampton. But then there's also kind of City and then Newcastle. I'm not sure if we're classing that as a difficult fixture or not at the moment after that. Diaz was massively overperforming his XG, Sam. He was the 5th highest, 2.4 more goals than should have scored. Salah, unsurprisingly, the top underlyings and also the top FPL scorer for Liverpool. 'Twas ever thus. And the best XGC as well. Is Trent vulnerable? Is a question we should probably come on to in a second. But yeah, I mean, Liverpool have looked like they've adjusted pretty well under Arne Slot. They're only they're level actually with Man City. I don't know. I put Liverpool first just because we've got a little bit of a tangent on City to go into. But I mean, they've also been one of those teams that feels semi-situational almost. Is that right to say, Sam?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the reason they're semi-situational is because of the way Arne Slot rotates his side very effectively. And we saw that in the Eredivisie last year and in seasons past as well. He does tend to bring off even his strongest players after 70, 75 minutes at fairly regular, consistent intervals. And we thought maybe Salah would be immune to that. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. And at 12.7, I think he is now. Is that just too much to have someone who's only playing 70, 75 minutes a match when he needs to be rested for a European game, for instance, or when we get to the Christmas period and the congestion is pretty tough for them? The same goes for Luis Diaz, of course. He's another player in those positions, those wing positions that Arne Slot does like rotating. And there's a lot of competition in those areas as well. Gakpo's playing well. Darwin, whilst obviously he's a little bit of a running joke for FPL managers, he's still a decent quality striker that will be demanding minutes at times. At the moment, Jota seems like the flavour of the day, but in 2-3 weeks' time, I reckon there will be a benching for him at some point, or at least he's taken off at 60 minutes, maybe even 59. Everyone gets annoyed, asks whether it's the time to sell him as well. And we're just going through that at the moment with Luis Diaz. I think with him in particular, it's all the more important to talk about it now because we're coming off of an international break where on the back of the last one, he was going to get benched, and Slot did say as much as well. It was only the fact that Gakpo came back injured that they had to start Diaz effectively. So I do genuinely expect a benching for Diaz in game week 8 against Chelsea after Gakpo performed well as well. So that's concerning. And I think with all of those factors in mind, that is probably why Liverpool attacking assets are situational. You can own them for a good run of fixtures, back the 70-minute men to perform to the level they need to still get decent returns for you, because they're a great attacking side. The XG is fantastic, of course, but you can't go on XGI per 90. You've got to do it on basically a per 70, 75 basis for a lot of these players. And Salah's 2 million more than the likes of Palmer, the likes of Saka, the likes of Son, who are all putting up very similar, if not slightly better numbers at the moment.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think with Jota especially, I had him on the preseason thing as being like, you know what, if this guy's starting, he's like a must own effectively because the points per 90 and the underlying data per 90 as well. It's just ridiculous, really, how good Jota is at that price. It's just, as you said, the reservations surrounding minutes and the reservations surrounding the competition, which can be a little bit off-putting, especially if you have other individuals around the price bracket or below the price bracket who are providing that consistency. But Liverpool, as you say, are a very, very good attacking side. It's just if you've got like the likes of Bumo, the likes of maybe going forward Johnson, providing the certainty of starts and near certainty of starts, and it's all within that sort of area other than Salah of players who within certain conditions you was hoping perform for you within decent fixtures. And the fact that Liverpool's fixtures are a bit sort of mixed does kind of, I suppose, push you to think, oh, okay, is there anything else I can do? Are there any other ways I can gain an advantage from moving their players on? Does that extend to Trent, though, is the question. So pre-season, we weren't too sure on Trent. And then after a while, it became clear that actually, that he's actually quite a decent pick at the 7 million price point. I don't know whether there's going to be a little bit of a reconsidering. It's not because of reconsidering what Trent is as a player and what he as an FPL asset provides, more that if I sell him for a Gvardiol, say, or sell him for someone a little bit cheaper, like a Porro, or even further than that, I can then pour the money into basically making a freemium at the end. So owning, by game week 12, Saka, Palmer, and Haaland all in the same team, which may be potentially optimal going forward. It's always going to be a bit of a difficult sell, isn't it, Sam? I remember, is it Trent versus Leicester a few years back when everyone's kind of sold him for 1 week and you end up with 21 points. Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that kind of it weighs heavily on experienced FPL managers' minds. But the next two, especially Arsenal versus game week 9, he's a player that you either play, you're never going to bench the guy. So he's a player that you either play or sell, isn't he, effectively? I mean, is he vulnerable for any of your plans going forward? He certainly is for mine.
Yeah, short answer, yes, he is vulnerable for sure. He's absolutely fantastic. I'm very bullish on Trent. He's one of my bold claims this year that he'll get 200 plus points. Absolutely love him as an FPL asset. But The problem with Trent at the moment, he's running at about 0.48 XGI per 90, mostly on assists. I think 0.05 of it is goal threat so far. But that's on average, you'd expect some sort of attacking return, much more likely to be assists every other game. So far, he's been unlucky. He's only got 1 in 7, but he's still running at that level that you would expect 1 in every 2. If we assume that that is more likely to be assists, which again, the data shows it would be, that is an extra 3 points every other game week. Now, that's great if you also can add in a few clean sheets here or there, and therefore there's a decent chance at bonus as well. Anytime that Liverpool keep a clean sheet, he creates so many chances that he's likely to get bonus, even if he doesn't get that assist. If he does, then we're looking at a very, very decent haul, of which he's gotten 1 so far this season, 1 11-pointer. However, that's with some good fixtures we've had in the past. You'd expect the data to regress slightly against tougher opposition. You'd also expect the chances of clean sheets to regress slightly against tougher opposition. Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa, Southampton, I think we're all okay with that. Then Man City, Newcastle, is that the next 7, I believe? Yeah, I think that's 7. How many clean sheets do we actually expect from Liverpool in that run, knowing that Kelleher will be the keeper, not Alisson? Kelleher's a good number 2, but he's not Alisson. I don't know how many clean sheets I'm expecting from them. And if it's not many, if it's, let's say, 2 or even 1, then I think Trent is probably a sell. If it's 3 to 4, then I'm probably more on the side of, okay, he's probably worth just holding on to, because you can downgrade the Trent spot to, let's say, a Porro or an Ait-Nouri next week. That's fine. You've got 2-3 million extra to play with, or 2.5 million extra to play with. If that gets you from a Diaz to a Palmer, or a Diaz, or some sort of 8 million midfielder up to Foden, is that points difference made up for with that second move? I think if Liverpool are keeping 3 or 4 clean sheets in the next 7, it probably doesn't. If they're keeping 1, maybe 2, which at the moment I'm more tempted to say is likely, then I think it probably does pay off. And you take a gamble that Trent's data himself will regress slightly and the clean sheets will stay fairly low. It could bite you, but I would take a good bet that his ownership's also going to shrink a little bit over the next few, and therefore it might not hurt you that much, even if he does score the odds decent haul here or there in the next run.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. Like, it's the vulnerability is simply that reliance on clean sheets, as you say. I remember at the start of the season, FPL.team calculated all the lost bonus points sort of thing. I think he lost 5 last year, or something like that, which isn't loads. And there's also I had a look at this pre-season, and Eredivisie tax obviously in mind, but Slots Feyenoord were second, first, and first best defence over his 3 years there. So he does know how to run a tight ship, albeit with clear caveats. The thing is, without reiterating your point in full, it's one where he might end up being the sacrifice to afford other things in the future, just because of that. Really, I personally love to keep him for the whole season. It's just whether I keep him at the expense of owning Saka and Palmer.
Exactly,
and that's probably a fairly easy conclusion to come to about who gets sacrificed, really, unfortunately. So it is what it is, and I think that even sooner rather than later, I think probably the Arsenal game in game week 9 is going to be offering a lot of people a convenient get out clause for Trent to be sold, and which will probably herald him going on to score a free kick, keep clean sheet, and all of that sort of thing. So that's just the nature of FPL, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, hey, there we go with all of that. Man City equal with Liverpool on Team XG. Haaland top for most things except XGI, which is Palmer. But streets ahead, best captaincy of the next 2, Wolves and Southampton. Lots of people, including myself, considering the triple captain in game week 9. Game week 10, Bournemouth away. Game week 11, Brighton away. None of them particularly worrying anybody. Decent ownership for Rico Lewis. and some Guardiola's sort of dotted around. XUC, their fifth best. Not sure I want to add to Rico, but maybe Guardiola for Trent could be on the cards for Southampton, just as a short-term sort of play. And then that gets taken down to afford Palmer and Saka later on. It does feel negligent, doesn't it, Sam? Over the next few to go without, especially next two, to go without a second City attacker. I feel like there may be a bit of a movement, and it's been quite quiet online at the moment. It may be movement to look at Foden if he does okay versus Wolves, to bring him Southampton at home, just to get the rewards on the table right now. And I think we're talking. Normally, we have the Gameweek preview, the knee jerk. Maybe we bring that up to this spot, because I think maybe Foden's the one who would probably encapsulate the knee jerk really well. Would he be the one, and especially if Saka was out or was highly doubtful, maybe kind of that would be even more pertinent. But I mean, there's a lot of chat about Foden. I don't know. I did say when I was considering him on wild cards that obviously you're looking to forecast going forward, and yes, the past is the past, but the player's got good quality, etc., and so on and so on. Is now the time to go for that? And there's obviously rewards on the table, aren't there?
Yeah, and I'll say this now. I think if you're thinking, oh, I'll give it a week on Foden, I think you're going to miss it. I genuinely think you're going to miss it. Like, Wolves, Southampton as that double is what you want him for. You don't want to miss the Wolves one. If he hauls that week, you've basically just got the one next fixture before. Okay, it's a decent run still. But by that point, you're already going to be looking around, thinking, "Oh, I could have Palmer. Oh, I could have Son. Maybe there's going to be other options." And I just think if you're the kind of manager who wants to take the chance on Foden, you do it now in game week 8 when they've got the longest possible run of good fixtures left, knowing that he did start before the international break. He only got, I think it was 72 minutes. But he then also did start for England in one of the 2 games. He started, I believe, in the Champions League once as well. So he has been building up the minutes, and you would think that now is going to be the time for Foden to reintegrate into the City lineup in full. That's not to say he's going to play every single game, but if you want the benefit from Foden, it's easier to just not try to predict which game he's going to miss and just own him for the lot, knowing that the explosive haul could happen at any time. He is a frustrating own when he's not starting every single week, but when he's fully fit, he proved last season that he can force himself into City starting 11 every single week. He became one of their most important players. And I think it was Late Riser on The Wire mentioned and astutely noticed that he was actually playing as effectively ancillary striker in the match he did start in game week 7, I believe it was. And he was quite unfortunate not to get the cutback once or twice or receive the ball in dangerous areas. So I don't think we're far away from seeing a Foden haul, and I don't think it's as outlandish as some people were maybe assuming, that he just goes on a little run now. But if you're going to go for it, I do say just dive in headfirst now rather than giving it a week, because Wolves and Southampton as a cluster are the 2 weakest defences so far, and you just don't want to miss the Palmer-esque mega haul and be a week late to that party when everyone else jumps on him as well. If he hauls against Wolves, everyone's going to be on him again in game week 9. I just think that's going to be too late.
Yeah, it's Chad Scott said in the chat that 1 in 3 games he's going to miss, and that's definitely a bit of a worry. Last year we didn't quite see that because of De Bruyne long-term injury. Need to kind of check in on that one. Even with De Bruyne out, he's been in and out of the team. It's just basically a really strong situational pick, isn't it? You've got the fix in front of you, as you say, Sam, and if you do have the means to get there, then it's a punt that I don't think anyone can really argue with to a large extent. Can somebody with quite a team which is quite close to the template, as it were, afford to go there at the moment? Well, I think most of the time you'd be looking at selling a Saka, wouldn't you? Not selling a Palmer. Is that really what you want to do at the moment, especially considering after game week 12 you're going to want that player back, and they have that underlying ability to just kind of do points in any game, albeit the Saka probably is going to get assists for Gabriel to nod in the big games. It's worrying, isn't it? whether he wants to do that. Although the rewards are on offer, this is where the risk reward thing comes in FPL and bites pretty heavily, and I wouldn't mind it at all. I'm not sure that we could do it. I'm not sure I could do it. But it's one of those where it comes down to risk appetite at the moment. It also comes down to, I suppose, your assessment of the situation in front of you. Do we need to see more, or do you just go for it? It's a big question. I don't know whether it's one that we're going to be able to get to right now. And talking of Saka, Arsenal are third best XGC, despite playing Villa, Spurs, Man City already. A bit of copium, Sam, for you and I on the double defence. Next four, not mixed bag. Shall we say? So Bournemouth away, probably a decent fixture. Liverpool at home, a bit worrying, but it's at home. Newcastle away in 10, Chelsea away in 11, Saka top for the underlying and top for FPL points so far. Havertz actually not too far behind Saka. Those who did go for double attack have been rewarded, as mentioned last week. Just 0.4 of net GI behind Saka. It's actually third for non-net GI overall, but a 14-point difference in FPL. A team, I think, where any sale, you basically are going to be boomeranging that at some point. So you've got to factor that into your planning. And I think that in of itself may give you pause for thought, perhaps, on moving out an Arsenal player.
Yeah, very well put. And I think that one opportunity here is because they're going into an iffy run. If you wanted to do a bit of restructuring by boomeranging for the next 3 weeks, let's say you've got double defense, but you kind of fancy Havertz alongside Saka, then maybe you could look at getting rid of one of those defenders for the next 3. And then instead of boomeranging straight back to that defender or goalkeeper, you could upgrade a striker to Havertz, for instance, or the reverse of that. If you didn't fancy Havertz, you fancied Arsenal double defense, you could shift away from Havertz, maybe to a Solanke, for instance, for this little run where it's maybe a little bit iffy. 3 away games in the next 4, of course, and then you can get back to an Arsenal defender and double up in defense after that. So there are opportunities there, but I think with Arsenal, it's a bit like Man City as well. The team quality is just so high. They are the difficult fixture. And despite the fact that they've got 3 away games in the next 4, you back them to be the likely favourites in each of those games. So you still think they're going to perform well. And the only way I'd be getting rid of any Arsenal players this week is if Saka was indeed confirmed out, which I don't think we're going to get.
No, definitely not. I think we can all reconcile ourselves with the fact that Arteta's going to say, at best, we need to check on him. At worst, maybe he'll say he's not available, and that will kind of open the floodgates. But I suspect it'll be somewhere in the middle where it'll be like, I think he's all right, but we need to see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's the whole usual, he's not in training, or, oh God, you never know. I mean, last time, I think it might have been literally this time last year, you had Bournemouth up next, international break. Again, limped off.
Yeah.
And I took him out my wild card. Excited. Wild card.
Got a brace.
I think it might have been actually.
And then he gave the penalty to Odegaard for the hat trick.
That was it. Yeah, it was like 4. It was 4-0, wasn't it? Something like that. Gosh.
4-0, 4-1, something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, a bit of a holding pattern, I think, with Arsenal at the moment. I think if you do own Saka, if you don't hear anything, then assume he's going to start. I'm assuming he's going to start, to be honest, and take from there effectively. Maybe by game week 9, you may be looking at it and think, oh, okay, well, Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, that's enough for me to think, yeah, right, I'm going to go for Foden for 3 weeks. But you've got to have a plan in place to basically bring him back. I think or go to Havertz if you're that way inclined. Bournemouth are next. Limited interest for now, I'd venture. They've done very well, to be fair, to be below that top 5 in the team XG on 12.1. Arsenal at home, Villa away, Man City at home, Brentford away, and are on the next 4. I think the FPL interest is very much limited to Semenyo, who's top for underlying, top for FPL points. The run from game week 11 to 20 is actually really good FDR wise. So if you are thinking that Semenyo is expendable, maybe you might want to think about it again. And if you do own him and you did wild cards when we all did in game week 6, a lot of us did in game week 6, maybe you already had a plan for what you're going to do. But yeah, I mean, one of those I think we can probably do briefly, Sam. Anything, Sam, Bournemouth?
No, not at all. Just with Semenyo in mind, I'm pretty happy to bench him in one or two of those. And if I need to start him in any one of the next three, I don't think it's a nightmare. He's pretty, well, not necessarily the talisman for Bournemouth, but he's pretty central to everything good they do. So I wouldn't put it past him to score in any one of those three tough fixtures. So yeah, whilst there are other decent options at that price, I don't think it's necessarily worth the free transfer, considering the long-term fixtures to come, as you astutely mentioned.
Yeah, fair play. Brentford, I think, as well, a bit of an open shut case too. So in the middle of that great run currently, Man United away, Ipswich at home, Fulham away, and Bournemouth at home. XGC pretty poor, fifth from bottom. Losing those fullbacks seem to have really sort of rocked the paradigm in terms of how they're setting up defensively. Players missing Bumo will go there, as Nick was mentioning last week. It's kind of the missing piece of the jigsaw for him. He's actually the second highest O performer, Sam, on goals minus XG right now, 3.2. He's scored 5 goals from 7 shots on target, excluding 1 shot, 1 goal from the penalty last week. But yeah, I mean, a bit of a no-brainer at the moment. One of those where you'll pick up points for those who, whatever reason, won't go there. The only note I've got on them, really, I've got, 3. One, Happer didn't go with Flecken, despite Raya not returning the goods in ostensible gimme fixtures. It's one of those with Flecken. It just never felt right. Carvalho at 4.8, an interesting option to go to if Rodgers races run prematurely, and Vandenberg at 4.0. They seem to be playing that 5 at the back fairly often, so he could come in as being quite a decent just fixer, enabler sort of character. Fixtures are very good up into game week 14, when Bumo will probably hand over to Bowen for me.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, whilst Burmo is overperforming on his data, the data itself is still good. They look like a very coherent team, as they always do under Thomas Frank. And I can only see them continuing to run at about this level pretty much throughout the season. He's a good price. He's on penalties. He's 90 minutes. I wouldn't overthink it. He's just an absolute lock in my team at the moment. Maybe Visser coming back sometime soon, we think, could be an interesting option moving forwards, because when he starts, his data is fantastic and he does get very consistent returns. And with Tony gone, you'd expect his place is much more secure, but we have to wait for that. And for now, Brian and Burmo, absolutely fine by me.
Yeah, next international break, isn't it, for Visser?
For
Man United are next. Bruno providing Stockholm syndrome. It didn't quite come off. It's not quite come off for him recently. But people are saying throughout the FPL Twitter sphere that he's an include on the Game Week 8 wildcard, if people are anyway. Unsurprisingly, top underperformer for goals minus XG. Onana is the top scoring player due to those 4 clean sheets and 7, despite middling XGC. Classic United. Who knows what the hell is going on there? As I said, I've a little bit like Nunez. I've kind of quite quit on Bruno, but he's not a player who's going to be out of the running for me. Those fixtures are actually not that bad, honestly, and the kind of the run in going forward isn't that bad for United either. The next 4 are Brentford at home, West Ham away, Chelsea at home, and Leicester at home too. And I think, yeah, I said the mid-run isn't bad at all for United. It's just who the hell is going to come through. I mean, it would be very nice, wouldn't it, Sam, if someone like a Rashford at 6.9 or a Garnacho at 6.3 now comes through and actually does start to look pretty decent, because up until kind of the start of December, their run's more than all right.
Yeah, they're just in a bit of a state of flux at the moment. And you'd imagine that the starting 11 becomes a little bit more guaranteed through the season when Ten Hag does figure out who his backed wingers are. You would think that Rashford and Garnacho have good shots at it, but for the time being, they're getting early subs. They're not even starting some games. You just can't go there right now. And Bruno, I've already been burned by him this season. The data's okay, but it must be said, it's actually not that outstanding so far this season. 3.1 from 7 games isn't brilliant. So I'm more than happy just to put him to one side for a considerable amount of time until Man United look like more of a coherent unit, and we can much more quantifiably, I guess, on them for the numbers every single week. I just don't think we can at the moment. So again, it's partly the price. With Bruno, there are just as good, if not better, options who are also getting 90, who are also on penalties, who are cheaper than him. So why wouldn't you just go there? There's just too many good midfielders to fit Bruno in my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where you make massive gains because especially for an analytics bloke or person, and then it certainly kind of makes sense from one angle. But as you say, the opportunity cost is pretty high. Fulham are up next, not very far away from United at all, actually. 10.8 to United's 11. Aston Villa at home, Everton away, Brentford at home, and Crystal Palace away. One of those teams, again, who are mismatched. So Traore, rolling back the years, probably all those one-on-ones he keeps missing, is the top underlying scorer, and Smith Rowe is the top point scorer. I guess it's one of those, isn't it, where they're okay for the long run. They're a very good source of, I guess, edge pieces. They've got a decent XGC. They're 8 for that. Robinson, Anderson, who's actually circling the drain to drop to 4.3, a player who's high in mind for me going forward, potentially is kind of one of those who's got a decent-ish Christmas. He has a 90 minutes. And there's these plethora of kind of mid-price, pretty decent midfield options that you're never going to buy. Traore, Pereira, and Iwobi. I don't know how you're ever going to arrive at any of those as a solution, certainly for the two of us potentially. But if some did happen, like fair play. And up front, Jimenez, the cheap striker right now at 5.6, rewinding the years a little bit. He's top for non-pen XGI per 90 actually currently, which surprised me a little bit. One of those teams where it's not going to make or break your season at the moment to not own one of those players, but nonetheless a very handy team for those edge pieces, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's nice that they've got decent players in pretty much every position as well. So if you're lacking a spot somewhere, then I wouldn't hate the idea of a Smith Rowe or a Traore in midfield. I wouldn't hate the idea of a Jimenez up top or a Robinson or Anderson at the back. So yeah, they kind of work out quite nicely just to round out your side. They can easily be your 11th, 12th men most weeks because Fulham do tend to up their game even against the toughest opposition. So, and that's something we've seen over several seasons now under Silva. So they're never going to be terrible players to play, even in the toughest fixtures. So they're almost the ideal bench fodder most weeks. And they're at a price where you can have them as bench fodder, especially more so the Traores and the Smith Rowes of the world, because Smith Rowe is a little bit more expensive. But you're more than happy to just have them sat on the bench waiting to come on any given week. And Fulham are a very decent Premier League side. They've proven that over several seasons. And yeah, they're very reasonably priced. So yeah, I wouldn't hate anyone going for any of those options that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, that's literally it, isn't it, with Fulham? Fairly decent. Next up is Brighton, another one where the top FPL point scorer doesn't match the underlying. They have Matoma as the top underlying, and then Welbeck, who's top scorer at the moment. Potentially skippable, I think. Tough run over than Wolves in game week 9 for the next few. Newcastle away, Wolves at home, Liverpool, Man City, probably two of the 3 hardest games in 10 and 11. One that we can probably skip and move on from.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Maybe not something we need to. Yeah,
back on the menu, game week 12, that's for sure. Similar for West Ham, bit of an irrelevance for now. Everton 11 is okay, but another couple before you get to a nice little run up until Boxing Day for West Ham. As I said, I've got eyes on Bowen to take over from Bumo in 14, but it seems like they're in a bit of a team in transition, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess under new management, they were always going to take a little bit of time, but 7 game weeks has been probably long enough. And you can understand why some West Ham fans were getting a bit frustrated. But yeah, Bowen has been ticking along very nicely, regardless of that. Five returns, is it, so far this season already? So yeah, absolutely fine player to own pretty much at any given moment of any season. He always ticks along nicely. And the fixture run, whilst not outstanding, certainly nothing I'd be scared of owning Bowen for in the immediate future. And then, like you say, once the fixtures turn for Brentford, you can easily see yourself moving across to Bowen. And yeah, I think he'll just be a good pick moving forwards. I don't think there's much else other than him right now that you can reasonably look at, though. So this is probably another pretty short one.
Yeah, good old talisman theory with Bowen. He's absolutely fine. If you want to own him, fair play, etc., and so on and so on. West Ham, very middling for HTC as well. So maybe they'll offer up something when their fixtures turn, but not right now. Newcastle too, not lived up to the billing. Isaac not gotten going at all. There is a world where things transpire differently, and he's something one of those players that we're also thinking, oh, you know what, do we really want to sell him? But it's just not really worked. Doing well in the table, the overall table, that is, the points table, in spite of their underlyings. Early December, I think, and certainly mid-January, they've got a very good run. But right now, it feels like they're kind of FPL relevant. Brighton at home, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, Forest away. Gordon's their top underlying. Harvey Barnes is the top FPL point scorer. But another one, I think, Sam, that we can just kind of leave for the moment. Moving on to Villa. Underwhelming, especially as I am sat with two of them. The next three are actually all right. Fulham away, Bournemouth at home, Tottenham away. Tottenham away, obviously very good in attacking sense, and Liverpool away in 11. Watkins, unsurprisingly, top underlying at top for the points. Defence, Sam, is the biggest surprise for me. They're second best for SGC.
That is a surprise. I didn't know that.
But you just don't see it, do you? It's the first clean sheet of the season against United, and you're not going to be looking at any of their defenders, I don't think, not even the goalkeeper. I mean, Watkins and Rodgers, realistically, are the only players in the mix, and it does feel like a case of don't buy, don't sell, really, with Villa, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. I wouldn't be looking at bringing in either of them right now. I am a bit jealous of Watkins owners. I do think that the next three suit him quite nicely. So I certainly wouldn't be looking at moving him on yet, unless it was to maybe bring in another premium in midfield with a little bit of a swap, but or a double move rather. So yeah, I mean, look, they've been slightly unimpressive or uninspiring in the league, but you can understand that they're getting into the Champions League football again for the first time in a long time. Obviously, great performance against Bayern, and they're just trying to manage to fight on two fronts now. Or I know they were in Europe last year, but it's a significant step up anyway. So yeah, I'm interested to see how long they're able to keep churning out results without the data necessarily reflecting that. But the next three, not bad. If you own Watkins, if you own Rodgers, they're absolutely fine. Rodgers is still, in my mind, the perfect eighth attacker, where you can just bring him on when the likes of a Semenyo has an Arsenal at home. You can rely on Rodgers away at Fulham, for instance. So that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't be buying them at this point unless you're on a wild card and then you just want to fill out that eighth spot with Rodgers in midfield.
Yeah, certainly. It's decidedly mixed bag of fixtures going forward. I do think that they do start to again get pretty decent from kind of game week 13. I think it's game week 14 actually onwards. They do have Man City in game week 17, which is, I think it might be Boxing. No, I think 18 is Boxing Day. It's just for Boxing Day. But one of those things where I think if you do own Rodgers, you're just going to leave him there, aren't you? A very good enabler, not a Cole Palmer enabler, but still a very good enabler. But if you do own Watkins, I think you've got to be thinking about a bit of an exit plan, just to kind of, I suppose, reallocate that money elsewhere. A bit of a trend almost that I'd like to keep him long term, and I might do. It's just that selling him in 11 for Cunha, or even earlier for Cunha, who we'll speak about in a little minute, does feel like it might be quite good just for freeing up some cash effectively. And yeah, all the other kind of responsibilities, as you mentioned, Sam, do seem to be dragging Villa down a little bit, and that is shown in the underlying data that we're getting to them right now in the XGC. What's that kind of putting them 12th? A little bit of a gap between them and Saints. Saints do paradoxically run into a decent four. Leicester at home, City away, which obviously isn't great. Everton at home, and then Wolves away. Mr. Dibbling, top for underlying and top for points. 18 points is top at the moment. That's not really too surprising, is it, Sam? I wonder as well how much of Saints' underlying team XG is because of that one game. So yeah, it is one of those, isn't it, where maybe that Newcastle game in game week 1, when there was a red card, is informing where they are on this table.
Yeah, there are moments where it looks like we could create quite a few chances, but those moments are fleeting at the moment, and I just, with the next 4 fixtures in mind, we really need to get points on the board in 3 of those to stand any sort of chance in the league this season. So they're big matches. I'm just a little bit maybe confused with what Russell Martin currently thinks his strongest starting 11 is. I think the one thing that we do know, which is the only real relevant factor here for FPL, and that is obviously what this pod is for. It's not just for me to vent my feelings on Southampton, as much as I'd love it to be. But Dibbling does seem to be fairly secure in the starting 11 right now. And at his price, that is good value for money, because his XG so far, not great, or XGI so far, not great. But it's important to note he's only just gotten into the starting 11 in the last few game weeks. So look, he's a very, very promising talent. I expect him to go on far beyond Southampton and achieve great things. And as long as he's in the starting 11, I don't think you're going to find a better 4.5, 4.6 if he's had the price rise. I actually can't remember in the game.
Yeah, it was 4.6, so that's pretty decent. So yeah, all right, on to the next one. Crystal Palace, I think maybe another skip other than Eze, really. 20th overall for non-pin XGI. 1 goal so far, but a few near misses. Owner's very unlucky. If you got that pen or the ref was less trigger happy, then maybe he'd be more of a consideration. But yeah, Palace in total, I feel like they're a bit of a team in transition. Next up, Forest. Wood, good solid pick, I think. Mark and Crash corresponds to he's got 12 or so goals in him. He's had 4, will definitely get to 10. A good one to throw in if you need like a 90-minute man in the cheap seats. Next 4 are Crystal Palace at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, and Newcastle at home. 4th best defence from the XGC. Decent Christmas as well. Milenkovic, boring AF, but high on my list for benchmen / edge pieces once we see the X minutes become even more important as the calendar basically gets squeezed. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with Forest.
Yeah, completely agreed. Wood, yeah, seems like a very decent pick at his price. As long as he continues to start games, don't really see any reason that he wouldn't, considering how well he's been playing. I can see him getting 10 plus goals easily in the league. Great price, and on penalties, as we've now found out this season too. So no complaints from me. Good next 4 fixtures, and I expect him to score very well. So if you're looking for a striker at that price point, he's probably the go-to man right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically where it is, isn't it? Just like they're edge piece heavy, effectively, those sorts of teams. Everton as well are very similar to that. So McNeil, who I didn't particularly express much enthusiasm for, he's now 3rd for expected assists, the 4th highest O performer on goals as well, Sam. 3 goals from 5 shots on target of an XG of 0.6. Calvert-Lewin hasn't quite worked out for many people. I do think Ndai at 5.4 is maybe the best cheapie who's basically out there. But yeah, I mean, the fixtures remain good for them. I can see why. I know you're a Calvert-Lewin owner, Sam, and I've got Mikalenko. You know, they're quite good just to hold until that December period. I think it's like game week 15. They then go into Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City. I've got written down here, which seems scarcely believable, but wow. 0 points from those 4 fixtures, I think. I mean, they're okay for doing a job, a situational pick, but it's one of those as well where you look at them and think, oh, there's always going to be a little bit of a roadblock, and I don't know. I can't get enthusiastic about owning any of their players other than someone like Mikalenko that I can just keep on my bench. I mean, you own Calvert-Lewin. I'm assuming you may be looking at moving him on at some point soon.
Not really, to be
Really?
honest.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm pretty happy. Look, I'm not fixed on holding him, and there is a route that I could use him as a make weight to get to much better players in other positions with an extra free transfer. So he's by no means a lock in my side thinking I absolutely love him, but I'm pretty happy to own. I don't want to be overly reactionary. His data's okay for a player of his price. He's on penalties. He's getting 90 minutes, and the fixtures are absolutely fantastic for the next few game weeks. So I'm in no rush to get rid of him. It's just if there's an extra 0.2, 0.3 that I might need to get myself up to a player I really want elsewhere, then I would be willing to get rid of him, because I think there are other players that we'll come on to in a moment that are competing at his price point and just below that can probably near enough match him, if not maybe slightly better him. But no, I'm not that bothered by a couple of blanks for DCL. I think he's still absolutely fine to own.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much kind of, about your level of expectation, isn't it? With a player like that, and it makes a lot of sense. And if you do own McNeil or whatever, then yes, so there's overperforming. If you own Calvert-Lewin, yes, the fixtures are all good, and at that price level, then it's absolutely fair enough. I don't mind any of these players as an edge piece. It's not worked out thus far, but it could. With the fixtures beget form and all of that. I wouldn't be surprised, Sam, if you do have 1 week where Calvert-Lewin goes off and scores a brace and suddenly you're laughing. It's just one of those, isn't it? With a team like this, and it's all like this with the teams kind of around here. Wolves are a good example of that as well. Up next, where after the City game, things start to get a bit more interesting, don't they? So Brighton away, Crystal Palace at home, and Southampton at home. But they're top of most fixture tickers after a horrendous start, all the way pretty much until just before, maybe even New Year's. So I mean, Cunha probably is coming in for me to replace Watkins versus Saints in 11 before that decent run. Cunha is actually the third best forward for BPS this year, like very, very consistent. I think he's on pens as well. I'm pretty sure he is. And Ait Nori as well, 4.4. A few people have been kind of mentioning him about the place, but I'm not interested in their defense particularly for obvious reasons. But I mean, he could again. There's occasions where he's ended up playing sort of left wing, so another one who could be potentially kind of interest at a low price. Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of one of those who are very situational. All of their assets are very situational. We're not going to be touching them right now. If you're on wildcard right now, you definitely kind of may be thinking about having Cunha or Strand Larsen in place as your third striker. Maybe you'd be looking at Ait Nori as being your bench man for this week, and then kind of going forward, potentially him coming into the team. I think they're going to be one of those teams who are going to, provided they're not in a death spiral, which I think that probably this is just a result of how bad the fixtures have been. One of those teams who are going to be maybe playing a bit of a bigger role in our teams going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm keeping a very close eye on Wolves at this point forward. They've been very unlucky with fixtures. I think one of those games they were particularly poor in, but the rest are kind of, you can let them off a little bit. I expect them to improve. Once Man City's out of the way, I think they'll be very, very interesting, and a lot of people are going to start talking about them. I overall love Ait Nuri at 4.4. I think he's going to be significantly underpriced.
Yeah, perfect. Leicester are up. Okay, we're in the bottom two now. Feis up to 4.2. I've got here. XGI got a score. The underlying data score is not matching the FPL point scorer. And Vardy's underlying 1.2. Non-pin XGI. Oof. It's not great, is it? I think
Dizzying heights.
Yeah, compared to Calvert-Lewin, I think that you can probably say that that's not worked out for people who've gone there. Justin, who has scored 2 goals from 0.4 XG, is kind of the top point scorer for Leicester at the moment. I'm happy to skip that, to be honest. The only edge piece I can see being worth it is probably Feis. I know FPL Harry, who's a lot cleverer than us, has Mavadidi, and I'm sure he's going to come through 15 points of a Harry at some point. But there we go. At the bottom, Ipswich, Delap, he's probably the player who is of most interest to a lot of people. Maybe like Greaves. I'll speak about Davis in a second. Delap's the highest, their highest FPL point scorer, 31. He's the third highest performer in terms of goals versus XG. A few have gone there for cheapies, as I said. So Greaves, Davis, and Davis said, I'm not expecting miracles. They're bottom for XGC. I was wondering as well, Sam, if that was underpinned by just Liverpool and City in games 1 and 2. But no, there's high numbers everywhere. 2.4 XGC versus Saints, 3.7 versus West Ham. They're much better at home, and the fixtures are good. But it's one of those where you've got to be thinking, this is like your 11th player, your 12th player. You don't want to be packing your team out, even though they've got good fixtures, newly promoted team. I mean, if you're relying on like a Davis and a Dibbling in your 11 every week, you've got to be wondering, have I properly managed this? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some fairly unbalanced looking sides with not much depth and relying on a few of the promoted clubs' players actually doing very well so far this season. So maybe we need to reassess a little bit. But yeah, you're not expecting much clean sheet wise from Ipswich whatsoever. Davis, I still think at times this season he's going to be a significant factor, and I think he's going to have one or two bigger hauls in him. It's just those have to come in the weeks where they're keeping clean sheets or likely to keep the clean sheets for us to ever really even consider owning them for that moment. And we're probably going to miss the inevitable 15-pointer once or twice a year from Davis because it will come in a game that maybe we don't expect them to do that well in. But you know, at 4.5, he's a very reasonable option at that price point, and I wouldn't hate anyone going there, especially with good fixtures over a pretty long period of time. Similar with Greaves, he's okay as a 4 million defender just to have on your bench and break glass in case of emergency kind of defender in a very decent fixture. You could probably just about get away with playing him and hope that he comes in clutch with a header from a corner or something. But yeah, we're not generally looking at their defenders. The player that I am interested in, and I do genuinely rate very highly, is Delap. I think he has a big Premier League future. He looks built for the Premier League. Obviously came through the City Academy, so he knows what he's doing. He's been coached well, and he's getting coached well under McKenna now as well. They do seem to be finding him more and more often. He just has everything I like in a striker about him. And I really do think he's going to have a good season this year. So I think he's underpriced. I think the data will improve with the fixtures coming. And I think Ipswich are going to build a system which suits him more and more as time passes. So yeah, I'm actually quite bullish on Delap for his price. I think he'll be a bit of an outlier at that price point.
Yeah, I quite like him as a third striker, basically. And I think that maybe there's a case to look at him and Strand Larson at some point in the future as kind of like a bit of they're both got good fixtures. They might do quite well as being the 10th and 11th men if you can basically filter that money into owning a few of the bigger hitters all together in a freemium sort of setup. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I think normally we have our kind of game week head preview. I think let's maybe take some time out of that and put it into discussing kind of the ramifications of this, because there are a few things that we've discussed, like the knee jerk. I think we can kind of skip that over. I think kind of top transfers we can leave at the moment as well. I think there's definitely a lot of contingencies on the press conferences and things like that. But we'll still do bold claims. We'll still do best captains in our teams. But maybe we'll kind of take a bit of time out of that to just kind of discuss this a little bit, Sam. So we started the conversation last week with Nick. And adding in the discussions to the premiums and kind of how we were kind of managing them over the next few weeks. It does feel with the next four that we're in a bit of a holding pattern. And at least Nick was, with he owns Palmer and Saka. He wasn't looking at selling either of them on. And it feels sort of, form versus fixture is a real thing here. I mean, obviously Foden's kind of the stalking horse where you're going to be looking at him and thinking, well, is there a short-term gain to be had? But it does feel like a bit of a fallow one for many of the teams who are high in mind for us in terms of being contributors to our FPL sides, other than Man City. And it does sort of feel like everything here should be, I suppose, working towards the next swing, really, when the players playing for the teams that we want to be emphasizing in our team construction are going to end up having a decent fixture swing. Like game week 12 plan needs to be discussed here, despite not appearing on the sheet, and handily we actually have that. Hooray! I know there's a few other teams like Brighton who also their fixtures ameliorate significantly, but Saka and Palmer up until game week 20, so throughout the festive period, do embark on a very, very good run of fixtures, and maybe having a plan to have those guys, if you're kind of chopping and changing, does need to be looked at. So, for example, I said removing Watkins for Cunha or removing Trent for somebody else does mean I've got that money to then funnel into having a bit of a freemium strategy, assuming that Haaland's going nowhere for me. If you are going to be selling Haaland, then obviously it makes things a lot easier. But the next, the fixture run, I'm not going to read it off because that's a bit boring for everybody. I've read off a lot of fixture runs, but it is so good that it does kind of go back to the idea of being a holding pattern, doesn't it, of the next 4? Just accepting there are going to be some weeks where you are treading water. Maybe you will have to miss out on a short-term opportunity and keep your eye on the prize for the longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly something that I've got my eye on even this week, looking ahead. I do have Saka. I don't have Palmer yet. And I think a lot of managers are in a similar situation with maybe one of the two right now and trying to figure out when the best moment is to just get the deal done and make sure that they're both in ahead of this good fixture run. Look, at no point are any players absolutely essential. You don't have to own them for this period, but I think it's fairly clear that these two players on penalties, 90-minute men, central to their team's attacking threat, are going to be good owns for this run of fixtures all the way up to game week 20. For me, with Diaz being a significant issue in my side, and I know a lot of managers also have a similar issue, it's a question of, do you use that as an opportunity even as early as now, or maybe next game week when Liverpool's fixtures aren't looking, or fixture isn't looking too great either, as an opportunity to move across to the likes of Palmer especially, rather than going to a Foden or a Son if he's fit for a good little run of fixtures, but almost certainly booking in a transfer by the time you get to game week 12. And that's a decision that I'm weighing up myself at the moment, whether or not I want to take a chance on one of the sort of the beta picks rather than the alpha picks for the next few, or do I just want to say, you know what, I'm going to save the transfer down the line. I'm just going to go straight to Palmer, make whatever sacrifices I need to now, and hopefully that provides me with a much better base to build from. By the time I get to game week 11, game week 12, I should have more transfers in the bank and I can start focusing on other issues in my side, knowing that the three most important players, Haaland included in this trio, are already in situ, and I can kind of just put them to one side and know that they're going to return me points for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally it, isn't it? It's all about biding your time effectively and then taking those opportunities where you can, despite the fixtures not being particularly favourable. It makes me think, Sam, of like an RPG when you're waiting to hit the boss, but you have to spend your time doing dodge and parry combos. You know, there's always that sort of like phase where you can hit the boss, a phase where the boss suddenly goes invulnerable and you've got to do dodges and parries and kind of dodge basically all their attacks and stuff, and then suddenly you can hit them again. And it does feel like this period is a bit like that, unless, you know, there's things like what you said about getting something in place for the upcoming festive period in place early. I mean, it does all feel like this is kind of in service a little bit of the upcoming festive period, where you'll be looking to roll transfers, you'll be looking to get those pieces of the jigsaw in place as soon as you possibly can. And I think that kind of is how next four is looking. It's not the most exciting next four, and I think there will be potentially a few sort of weeks where you are looking at your edge pieces effectively coming through for you. You may see like a Semenyo, as we mentioned, coming off the bench and with a random goal, hoping for the best out of that, or maybe be shuffling players around. So if you maybe taking Semenyo again, maybe you would be deciding, okay, well, maybe there is a bit of an option to grab, I don't know, a Savinho or something like that if they're looking, if he does looking like he's going to be starting, or if you've only got two Arsenal getting a Trossard in, especially with Martinelli apparently also suffering an IB injury, or a Johnson too if you don't know him for Spurs. I think one of those periods which is going to be a bit of a holding pattern, and it's just about, I suppose, managing it cleverly, but making sure you've got in mind how you're going to be getting to, no one's essential, but getting to a place you're going to be happy with in game week 12. It's not unfair to say that a wildcard 6 team and a wildcard 12 team, I think, are going to have some similarities to them. And it's just this little period is always going to be a bit of a difficult one for FPL managers. That's for sure. Cool. All right. So Gameweek preview. As I said, we're going to take some time out of this one and skip over a couple of things. Normally we do knee-jerk best transfers and so on and so forth. I think we're going to leave the knee-jerk, leave the best transfers this week, and go on to the bold claim straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't. I don't think we either got any success this game week. It feels like a long time ago
It
now.
does.
I
Ages
actually
ago.
forgot what mine was, but sadly, looking at it, it was apparently a Leaf Davis 10-pointer, which I'm still bullish that it will happen at some point. I think he's got it in him. Clearly did not happen in game week 7. It was West Ham, was it? They lost 4-1. I really have to jog my memory there.
Yeah, it was.
He actually got a 0-pointer, I think, because he lost the 2 points for the goals conceded. So yeah, not great. And obviously, at least you did bench him, Tom. So you're much wiser than me on that one. But you didn't have any more luck than me with the bold claim this week, did you?
No, I was expecting Villa to show up versus Man United, and they did not understand the assignment. Well, they did understand the assignment, to use some Gen Z parlance. If we were thinking that we wanted Ten Hag to stay in place, although I was kind of hoping that they beat Villa, they beat United, just because I've got a bold claim sitting there waiting for the week for the year. Nice to get one of those off for the week ahead.
For the week ahead, I've gone with a Tom classic. I've gone for a 5 goals plus. In this week, I've gone with Newcastle versus Brighton. I think that's going to be a bit end to end. It's almost directly in contradiction, I think, to your bold claim, although maybe not completely directly. But there's definitely a correlation or an anti-correlation there. So it'll be interesting to see what type of game week this game week will be after the international break, which I'm assuming is the cause of yours.
Yeah, I mean, Newcastle and Brighton, 5 goals. That's not going to give anyone any joy, is it?
No.
Really? Because no one's going to own any of those players. Yes, I definitely like those. I've got an average game week score of below 40 points. I think that will pass the Forest test. That's one of those which is very hard to get bookies odds on.
Yeah, that is bold enough. 40's low. Yeah,
everyone's full of enthusiasm again for FPL, I'm sure. But I'm just betting it'll be damn squid, basically. Obviously, a lot of that hinges on Haaland keeping quiet and Bournemouth scoring. But I don't think that either of those two things are too far from the realms of possibility, but far enough to make it a bold claim. So yeah, average game week score below 40 points. It doesn't have to be our scores, by the way. It's just the average. Of 40 points. Best captains this week. I mean, we didn't need to skip it, but I think it is quite a short one. If you are a Haaland owner, and I think the vast majority of people in FPL are Haaland owners, this is a no-brainer. I don't think that there's any kind of yes, you could well end up if you go elsewhere and take him on, even if you do own him and you do get loads of points, well done to you. But it's one of those where I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, elsewhere, if you don't own Haaland, Sam, I suppose it is Saka versus Bournemouth, maybe even Mo Salah, old club Chelsea, a bit of flavour there. I don't really know.
Yeah, could honestly Saka, Salah, Palmer, they're never bad picks. But Haaland's away against one of the worst defenses in the league so far this season with a depleted defense. Yeah, you fancy it. Haaland would definitely be the number one captain for me. Saka probably number 2 ahead of Salah. But yeah, any of those, if you don't have Haaland, are probably fine, and you might be able to bag yourself a big haul because they're capable of it in any single game week.
Perfect. All right, and our teams for game week 8 to end up.
Yeah. So you're first up, Tom.
Okay. So probably looking to roll unless something kind of happens. I think it's always good post international break. I always feel like the outcome post international break is never particularly strong in terms of overall points. Reflects my role claim. But yeah, in a 4-4-2 at the moment, Semenyo is on the bench and Davis has come on as per the wildcard plan. I'm going to set up the bench nearer the time. I've got Stewart, Semenyo and Mikalenko. Stewart and Mikalenko both flagged at the moment, so I don't really know what's going to happen with those two. I'll figure all that out Raya and goal, Gabriel, Lewis, Trent and Davis, who's making his debut for me at the back. Johnson, Bumo, Rogers and Saka, who's got the vice, and Haaland and Watkins up top as usual. Haaland with the armband. We'll see how that one goes. Nice rolling out the 4-4-2, the old school Nick 4-4-2. What about you? Where's this chaos grenade then, Sam? I've been promised one.
Right then, so 3 free transfers, and Luis Diaz is stinking up my side at the moment. So I have options, and I think in most scenarios, I probably do need to look at getting rid of him this week. I could, and this is just devil's advocate, I could just leave it and hope he starts, or just put in Semenyo, for instance, for him, and then I'll get 4 next week at a better point, at a better entry point for the likes of Palmer. However, there are a few different routes I like. So number one, the chaos grenade, is as we keep referring to it as, would be a triple swap, all 3 free transfers, get rid of both of the Liverpool boys, Diaz and Trent, but also get rid of Calvert-Lewin for the triple up of Palmer, Ait-Nouri and Delap. Now, Ait-Nouri would be benched in this scenario, and I'd bring in either Mikalenko if fit. If not, Greaves will have to make do. It's obviously not ideal. And look, Palmer does not have a good game this week, but I'm banking on the fact that if I'm going to use, in this scenario anyway, if I'm going to use a free transfer to get rid of Diaz now, I might as well bring in the player that long-term I want for a very, well, basically for the remainder of the season. Why am I wasting time looking at bringing in a sort of a makeshift player just for a couple of weeks when I know really the player I want to get to is Palmer, and I'm reducing my chances of getting to him quickly by wasting free transfers? So that's my logic on Palmer. I do like Delap a lot, as we've mentioned on this pod, and I wouldn't like to get rid of Calvert-Lewin because I like the fixtures and I still think he's absolutely fine to own, but I need to find that extra 0.2 somewhere to make this move viable. And that's the way that I could basically make it work at the moment. So that would be the chaos grenade.
Oh, I really like that. Honestly, I feel like that's, it just feels like you're using those free transfers very wisely. When you're very wise, Sam. When I text you with some kind of half-assed opinion, you're very quick at providing me with a very grounded answer, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense." I texted you about Tuchel earlier. You were like, "Oh, here's why I think it's a good move," and I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'm excited now." So I think that all of those make a lot of sense, honestly, and it feels like they're players that you have longevity. Basically for you, as you said, you cut out the middleman. You just think, you know what, I'm setting up for the future, and those long-term sort of investments could pay dividends for you. So I really like that. I don't think it's much of a chaos grenade. I was wondering whether you'd be really kind of off the wall. I know you've discussed it on your own channel in your video, which I've studiously avoided the last couple of days. Yeah, I really like that actually. I think that's a really, really good move. And you've got players in place that you can just kind of be happy that it's a peace of mind thing that we've discussed in the past.
Yeah, I think so. That's option A. Option B very quickly would be Foden. I have a feeling he's about to go big, and I do like him against Wolves and Southampton. And I do, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it now. So again, it would be the 2 Liverpool boys, and it would be Foden with probably Ait-Nouri. At the start of the week, it was going to be Porro, but I'm just not sure if he's 1 million better than Ait-Nouri at the moment, considering they're not really keeping the clean sheets. And I think I can use that 1 million elsewhere in the next few weeks, especially to get to Palmer more easily when the fixtures truly do turn. So that's my second option. And then third option would obviously be just a bit of a boring swap Diaz down to like a Johnson or something. But I just don't know if that gets me closer to the team I want long term. And I'd prefer to use my 3 free transfers to really make some waves and get ahead of the template a little bit. Whereas if I do anything else, I feel like I'm just another week behind. So yeah, I've got some decision making to do, but it is reassuring that you at least didn't like spit out your drink and call me an idiot as soon as I mentioned the triple move, because I think a few people might.
No, I don't see why they would though. That's the thing. I mean, maybe there's going to be some opposition to removing Trent. But other than
Or
that,
getting Palmer this week against Liverpool. But I genuinely don't think that's a problem.
no, it's not a problem at all. I mean, we discussed that he could probably be on a par with Salah of old. That he just could return any game. We've discussed kind of the reality of that, and also getting in that Saka Palmer double up from the off. I mean, that's the best way of looking at these next four. To be honest, I'm a little bit jealous because, as we've mentioned, it's a holding pattern, right? So you've got those players in place. You know the fixtures aren't particularly great. That there's not the teams that you want to be targeting other than Man City, where we've both got Haaland and we've both got Lewis. And do you want to add another one? Like maybe, but it's not going to be the end of the world if you don't. I mean,
it's not going to hurt you. Yeah,
it makes so much sense long-term investment. Honestly, I mean, we'll see where you come to after the press conferences. But I mean, if you do that, I mean that's a really sort of sound set of moves in my eyes.
That's reassuring. Yeah, I was maybe 40-60 against it. Now I'm maybe 60-40 for it after hearing your opinion on it. So yeah, I'll do some more thinking on it. I'd like to mix it up a little bit, and I'm just so bullish on Palmer. I think he is the next big thing now. So yeah, I would like him in my team ASAP, ideally, and I think that might be a nice way to just get it done. And meanwhile, also make some calculated gambles on the likes of Aitnuri and Delap, who I both really like. So yeah, maybe. Yeah, I quite like it.
I've got more of a problem because I can't get Palmer. You can get him straight away. I can't do that because I've got Watkins, and I feel like I've got to see Watkins over the next 3 years discussed. So Fulham. Bournemouth,
I like those fixtures for him. I think you'll do well with him there.
They're fine, and I don't have the free transfers to do it. So I'm going to have to wait for a little bit with Trent in place as well. So that's a bit more of a piecemeal thing for me. And I suppose that's the beauty of the format right now, that you can do that, and then you're there without incurring the points hit, and suddenly you've got a massively refreshed team. Maybe not the fixtures, but in terms of the players, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty jealous of that, and there's no way I can get to anywhere near that with my team at the moment. So yeah, I look forward to you chipping away at my lead and taking it away,
or losing more ground.
No, that's not going to happen, is it? I mean, the player, apart from selling Trent, I don't really see any problem with selling Calvert-Lewin, who I'm not particularly infused by. I say that, and obviously he goes off and scores a brace. I don't really mind about selling Diaz, especially after international break. Trent, a bit more iffy. I'll probably be keeping him this week. But at the end of the day, if we discussed how it could be a sacrifice that would make a lot of sense to a lot of people. If you're trying to make money elsewhere, I mean, the calculation there is basically Trent versus Palmer, and I take Palmer every time.
Yeah, fair point. Although I do like that DCL fixture now. You've mentioned him specifically against Ipswich. They've been very poor. Anyway, let's not ramble on too much about my team specifically, because I know that we cater for all people, not just to try and work out my moves. But yeah, hopefully you've all enjoyed listening to us talk about all 20 sides, or pretty much all 20. We've missed out a couple, I think, but hopefully you'll forgive us because they weren't that FPL relevant. But it's been great to get back into the swing of things. An hour and a half of great podding again with you, Tom. I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully if you've been watching along out there, you have too. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL, myself at FPL Pricey on there, and Instagram and Threads, it's WGTA.FPL. And again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could do one or all of the following. That includes following us on those social channels, but also if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, that'd be great. And if you're watching along on YouTube, then please do remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely really does help us out.
Nice one. Thank you very much, Sam. We hope you enjoyed the pod. We hope it's assisted you. Next week, we'll be back on Monday. Back on Mondays again after this. Apologies again. We're a day late. I believe there's a Forest Palace game in the background, but I don't think that's going to affect anyone really. Enjoy the first weekend back. Hopefully my bowl claim is null and void, and we all have a great time with loads of points, especially if you're going to FPL meets. It is on Saturday. It's the Thirsty Bear in Waterloo from midday onwards. At FPL Meets on Twitter. I'll be there probably about sort of 3-4-ish, just because I've got some childcare and stuff, so it's hangover. Are you going this time, Sam?
No, unfortunately, I'm at a friend's birthday this time, but it will be with a heavy heart. He's quite into FPL, so I might try and drag him there for a little bit if I'm lucky, but I don't think so. That would be quite far-fetched. So maybe next time, but enjoy yourselves, guys, if you go along. It is great fun.
Yeah, and if you are going on your own, don't be afraid to come and find me. I'm sure you know what I look like. And so if you are going, I'll see you there. If not, we'll speak to you next week.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?